Hey everyone, this is Chef. Today we're going to talk about the February 14th World vs. World Balance patch. I know what you're thinking, Chef, this patch was a full 9 days ago, why are you only talking about it now? Well, I wanted to include some hard data on the rewards changes that were part of this patch, and since that system was broken when it released and had to be hotfixed a few days later, things took a bit longer than expected. But now that it appears to be working, we can take a look at it. I normally put this stuff at the end of the video, but I do want to mention really quick. If you think these videos are interesting and you want to see more of them, please do like, subscribe, and leave a comment. At the same time, if you don't particularly care about this style of video, please leave a dislike and a comment as well. It's not just for the algorithm, I use that kind of feedback when I look at it on the back end to figure out what kind of videos I want to make in the future. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's jump in. We'll start with an overview of the significant profession changes included in the patch, and then we'll move on to the rewards changes in the second half of the video. If you're only interested in one of those things, I invite you to use the chapter markers for this video to skip to the part that you care about. Firebrand, Chronomancer, and Tempest are the three classes looking at the biggest changes in this balance patch, and many of those changes are resulting from a rework of the way that mantra skills work. Mantra functionality has been reverted to how they used to work a few years ago for anyone who was playing at that time. You have to channel your mantra to get your initial charges. As long as you have at least one charge, they still refresh as normal. But if you use up your final mantra, they go on a longer cooldown and have to be rechanneled to be used again. For Firebrands, the final charge of a mantra is more powerful, and for Chronomancers, the initial charge of a mantra confers an additional benefit. In theory, I like these mantra changes. I think it's interesting decision making to decide if you need to use the final charge of a mantra on your Firebrand, and in particular, the final charges on Mantra of Lore and Mantra of Liberation look particularly strong. But in practice, I think these changes miss the mark. The long initial cast time, coupled with the long cooldown for using your last charge, mean that the downsides of consuming your last mantra outweigh the benefits of casting it. But I do think there's interesting design space here, and I don't think it would take much tweaking of cast times and cooldowns to make the last charge of a Firebrand mantra something that you would want to use during a fight. In future balance patches, this will be something to keep an eye on, but for now, you generally don't want to use that last charge of your mantra unless you really need to, or you're pretty sure that the fight is just about over. Many of these same critiques apply to the changes that Chronomancer received as well. To me, it looks like the balance team is trying to position Chronomancer as an alternative to Firebrand in the profession that provides group stability role, by adding Aegis on top of the stability that Mantra of Concentration now provides. But I still don't think it's quite enough to replace Firebrand as the king of stability in World vs. World. The overall kit that Firebrand has is just more powerful, and the fact that mantras have these drawbacks that we covered previously isn't really helping Mantra of Concentration fill that role. Again though, something to keep an eye on in future balance patches. It wouldn't surprise me to see Chronomancer continue to get incremental buffs to its support skills, so that it is eventually competitive with Firebrand in that stability role. Elementalist also received a series of buffs this patch, specifically for Tempests on staff. Transmuting your magnetic auras now generates stability instead of protection, and applies these boons to a wider area, which gives Tempest several sources of stability that they can now utilize over the course of a fight. I think this is a really interesting change, because it isn't necessarily a nerf or a buff. Instead, it gives Tempest some additional flexibility in the type of support that they can bring to a squad. For instance, if your Firebrands are already focused on providing stability and resistance, and relying mostly on Tome of Courage, Tome 3, you'd likely want your Tempest to maintain high cleanses by transmuting Frost Aura using Dagger. On the other hand, if your Firebrands are more focused on healing and condition cleanse, for example by running Battle Presence and Lore Master, then Tempest using staff have the ability to cover off gaps in stability that might normally be handled with something like Indomitable Courage. Staff Tempest also contributes a lot of potential crowd control, with knockbacks in air and lines and immobilizations in earth when using staff. My suspicion is that whether Tempest use Dagger or staff is going to vary a lot from group to group, and I'm also not sure that there's a consensus best build yet overall. But then again, I'm not an Ellie main, and the patch is still relatively new, so we'll see how things evolve. That about does it for substantial profession changes in this patch. There were some small tweaks, such as Necromancer's Warhorn skills getting some slight buffs, and Ranger's Entangle having its cooldown reduced, But I really don't think there's many other changes in these notes that are going to dramatically shift the meta one way or another beyond the ones that we already talked about, to Firebrand, Chronomancer, and Elementalist. So with the profession changes addressed, let's talk about the other component of this patch, the rewards rework. The blog post for this change was very light on details when it came out, and it was also a fairly broken system when it first released, only really getting fully implemented several days later. A bit of data collection, comparing some results with some friends and guild members, and that brings us to today. Defense events and capture events now scale along a series of factors, such as the tier of the structure being fought over, and the number of players that are present during the event. It appears to be difficult to earn gold participation in attack events without killing at least some enemy players, though it looks like defense events can still award gold just for repairing gates and walls. Rewards from these events have also been rebalanced, now giving masterwork and rare unidentified gear, sacks of trophies, increased world XP, and most interestingly, Grandmaster Mark Shards and Skirmish Claim tickets. These two currencies had previously been time-gated behind weekly pip rewards, and were a bottleneck for crafting legendary armor and trinkets in World vs. World. However, with this change, they can now be earned as part of capture and defense events, up to 2 Grandmaster Mark Shards and 2 tickets per event, depending on the tier of the structure being fought over. This is a pretty significant change to the gearing pipeline within World vs. World. And if it weren't for the fact that Ascended armor requires a stack of Memories of Battle, World vs. World would probably be the cheapest source of stat-selectable Ascended armor in the game after this patch. But the other big change here is the increase in World XP received from these events, and I think this is also going to be very beneficial for the game mode. If you haven't had to level a new account in a while, this is a reminder that the first 200 levels or so of World vs. World masteries are horrible. Your Warclaw only has 1 leap, you can't sniff, you can't glide very well, there's no auto loot, you only spend 2 supply at a time and you can barely hold any of it, and you're unable to purchase important sigils and runes like absorption or durability. The process of getting through those first levels is probably one of the biggest obstacles to player retention for World vs. World, and so the increase to World XP gained here means that it's easier than ever to get your footing in the game mode, get your initial quality of life masteries unlocked, and start contributing to different groups and squads on your server. Anyway, that's all I've got for you on this one. Sorry it's a bit late, I did what I could, but sometimes things just don't work when they come out. As always, you can subscribe to me here on YouTube if you'd like to see more stuff like this, and you can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Sheffplaysgames if you want to stop by sometime and just chat about the game mode. But until then, I've been Sheff, and enjoy the rest of your day.